Welcome, everyone, to Working People, a podcast about the lives, jobs, dreams, and struggles of the working class today. Working People is a proud member of the Labor Radio Podcast Network and is brought to you in partnership with In These Times magazine and the Real News Network. This show is produced by Jules Taylor and made possible by the support of listeners like you. My name is Maximilian Alvarez, and today we are going to Whiting, Indiana, where for the last 5 months, oil giant British Petroleum, or BP, has locked 800 workers out of their jobs at a crude oil refinery on the southwestern shore of Lake Michigan. This is the last unionized BP refinery in the United States, and this is a really important struggle and a really important story. But with everything in the world and the news being so crazy these days, it has not gotten the attention that it deserves from national media. But that is why we are so lucky to have someone like Sarah Lazar, a brilliant journalist and the editor of the excellent Workday magazine, going where others won't and lifting up the stories that need to be told and heard. In her recent report titled "Locked Out Refinery Workers Say BP is Trying to Starve Us and Crush the Union," which was jointly published by Workday magazine and the American Prospect, Sarah writes, quote, "British Petroleum, one of the 10 largest oil and gas companies on Earth, kicked out its workforce at the Whiting crude oil refinery, which at its peak produces 440,000 barrels a day on March 19th. The previous contract expired in January, and United Steelworkers Local 7-1 declined management proposals that workers say would existentially threaten the local. The union has been locked out for over 140 days, and it says it is fighting for its survival against an employer that wants to cut pay and jobs, undermine workers' ability to strike, and tear the local away from national bargaining. The lockout is illegal," the union says. By late May, United Steelworkers had filed 15 unfair labor practice charges with the National Labor Relations Board, alleging that the company is refusing to bargain in good faith and using threats, coercive statements, and surveillance. The fight has become a test of endurance. On one side are workers who are not receiving the equivalent of strike pay, though members can ask for help from an assistance fund financed by the United Steelworkers. On the other side is an oil company that brought in $189.2 billion in revenue in 2025. In an email to Workday magazine and the Prospect, BP spokesperson Cesar Rodriguez said that the company is pursuing, quote, "modernized job structures, training, and upskilling." But workers say that this is just code for greater disposability and degraded conditions. And they declare a new pay progression would make it easier for BP to fire people and harder for workers to get to the highest rates of pay. They're also concerned about the proposed loss of dozens of jobs from the bargaining unit. On March 2nd, management presented the local with their last, best, and final offer, and the union membership voted it down. A revised settlement was offered the next day, but it too was rejected. On March 17th, the union gave a counteroffer. Quote, "Just 4 hours later, the company rejected our counterproposal, issued notice of the cancellation of rolling extensions, and a notice of intent to lock us out of our jobs, effective at midnight on March 18th, according to the United Steelworkers," end quote. To talk about all of this, I am really grateful to be joined on the show today by 3 guests. Eric Schultz is the president of United Steelworkers Local 7-1. Lino Miller is an assistant griever for USW Local 7-1. And Tim Powell is a 19-year member of USW Local 7-1 and a volunteer for the Lockout Assistance Committee. Eric, Lino, Tim, thank you so much for joining me today on the show, especially with everything that you guys got going on. I really, really appreciate it. And I do wish we were meeting under less horrifying and infuriating circumstances. And, we're going to talk about the lockout and everything that's going on right now. But before we do, I'd love for listeners to get to know you first, because, most people have never met or spoken to folks in your line of work. So tell us more about yourselves, how you got into this work, and the kind of jobs that you do on a day-to-day basis before this lockout began.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for taking the time to have us. Again, my name is Eric Schultz. I'm a machinist in the refinery. I hired in October of 2009. I started off in our machinist apprenticeship program. So that was a 4-year apprenticeship. where you kind of learn the refinery inside and out from a mechanical standpoint. What machinists do out here, it's kind of an amalgamated trade. It's more like a millwright machinist. We'll do anything from repairing pumps in the field, turbines, compressors. We have shop work where we repair relief valves, the pumps and the turbines inside the shop. So it's kind of, we do a lot of things from A to Z as far as a maintenance millwright mechanic would do. And then so that was 2009, about 2014. July of 2014, I came onto the union board as a divisional rep. I represented our machinists and our instrument and electrical groups. And then about 5 years ago, I became president of local.
Yeah, man, like you machinists need to rebrand as like the MacGyver union, because you're out there fixing things that I didn't even know existed, or that are like taped together, and have like, you got to have an intimate knowledge of this machinery. And the kind of machinists I've talked to, from the railroad industry to the gas and oil industry to Kellogg's, like there are just so many nuances that none of us understand. So I can only imagine the kind of stuff that you guys are doing out there in the field.
Yeah, it's especially in an oil refinery, it's a very niche market. You run into equipment that you wouldn't run into in many other fields. We've got equipment from the 1940s and 1950s, all the way up to incredibly modern equipment. So you kind of need to know the gamut, and we've got some amazing machinists out here that they're absolutely experts on their units. They're the ones that our operators will turn to ask, for help troubleshooting, or even our engineers, walk into the main shop where our pump mechanics are, turbine mechanics, and ask them to help diagnose what went wrong and what they could do to fix it. So we've got some amazing mechanics out here, machinists.
Hey, my name is Lino Miller. I'm a operations specialist for the refinery. I grew up in the area. I've carried a card my entire adult life. First of which, out of high school, I carried a Teamsters card for a couple of years. I worked at the local UPS plant. After that, I ended up in an automotive plant where I carried a UAW card. Before I got into the refinery, I hired in just shy of 20 years ago. So if BP refuses to come back to the table and bargain in good faith, I could get 20 years on the outside locked out, which not a good feeling, but it is, that's where we're at. Inside the refinery, like I said, it's been almost 20 years. So I started out as an operator, which do rounds, take samples, monitor the equipment on a day-to-day basis. We work 12-hour shifts, swing shifts. From there, I became a board operator, a council operator, which is a specialist by trade, what's referred to in the refinery. And then I ended up becoming a chief operator as well. A chief operator and a council operator, which is a cross-qualified position, which is one of the positions that the company is proposing to do away with. So I would essentially get bumped down from a chief operator and a board operator to a technician. I would lose my specialist qualification and my pay that comes with it.
I'm Tim Powell. I started almost 20 years ago. It was 19 years this January. Started at the Cats, and it was spent just about 10 years.
I think that no one's going to know.
Yeah, so I started over at basically a gasoline processing unit, spent 10 years there. Had an opportunity to transfer to another part of the refinery where we were making, basically make diesel using high pressure hydrogen and crude oil. And I was an outside operator for most of that time. About 6 years ago, I got onto the console board operator job as well. So specialist, we take training every year. We do training every quarter, going through computer training. Now they're trying to say that we need to interview for these jobs again and see if we're still qualified to be there, if they're even going to keep the job. I'm third generation USW on both sides of my family. There's been union people throughout my family, from coal miners to steel workers, city bus drivers. I mean, my family has lived on a union paycheck for generations.
Well, let's talk about that, right? Because I started this show 8 years ago, not knowing much about unions at all. Like, I did not grow up in a union family. In fact, back in the day, we were more of an anti-union family. We didn't know anything. And to be honest, like the few, union jobs that like my brother had at like a Rite Aid, like, just weren't good. And so like, I think now that we're at a point in this country where, less than 10% of the workforce is actually in a union, it's important to sort of, talk to folks out there about, what being in a union means. And so I wanted to ask you guys, like, why is it important for workers in this industry especially, and, workers in general, to have a union? Like, tell us more about why being in a union is important to you and your family. And then let's sort of unpack some of the nuances of labor relations in this industry that listeners need to know about. Because again, we're talking about the last unionized BP refinery in the United States.
Yeah, sure. I mean, from my perspective, right, the first thing that most people come to, they think about is pay, retirement when they think of a union. For me personally, I feel like in this industry, it's more about the ability to collectively bargain, meaning we have 800 people that get to stand shoulder to shoulder, elect representatives. The representatives then go sit down with the company, and you're on as close to equal footing as you're going to get. Without a union, it's each man or woman for themselves. So the byproduct of that collective bargaining, yeah, it's pay and it's retirement, but to me, most importantly, it's having a voice on the working conditions inside the plant, safety issues. We've got a contractual joint health and safety committee where members of the union sit down with members of management monthly to identify safety issues and then create programs to try to address those issues. So at the end of the day, we do make good money because we work in an incredibly profitable industry, and it's a highly complex job that all of us do out here. But what good does that do if at the end of the day you're going to go home and you're not going to be the same way that you left, right? You're going to go home injured or even worse. I mean, this is an industry that when things go wrong, they can go wrong real fast. Incidences can turn into fatalities very fast in this industry. An incident that spirals out of control inside of an oil refinery is highly likely to affect the community. And if you follow along in the news in the last year or two, it seems like once a month we're reading about a refinery fire in which the community is ordered to shelter in place because of toxic releases that are getting into the community. So that's to me. I mean, the most important piece of a union is to make sure that we go home safe, and that when you retire, you actually can enjoy your retirement and not be struggling with debilitating injuries or diseases, which are very prevalent in this industry. You look at the cancer rates for an oil worker versus any other line. Right, you look at mesothelioma, different issues. I mean, we have asbestos is all over the refinery. Everywhere you look, there's stickers on piping that say, warning asbestos. So we live with these things every day, and that's to me the biggest thing that a union could do is help protect its workforce.
Well, and just to sort of like underline everything that you said in red pen, listeners are going to have the hairs on the back of their necks standing up the same way I am, because I've interviewed on this show a worker, Leo Linder, who was on the Deepwater Horizon when it blew, like in the Gulf, right? So if folks are wondering how bad could it get, that's how fucking bad it can get, pardon my French, right? But it can get, bad in so many other ways, like we've been covering on this show, right? We talked to folks in Roseland, Louisiana, near the Smitty's supply plant, right? Where, like that massive explosion and fire happened and people said it was raining black sludge all over the place, right? I mean, like we've talked to residents of East Palestine, Ohio, where that Norfolk Southern train derailed over 3 years ago. And you've heard the hell that they are going through. You've heard the hell that railroad workers are going through and how they are being, like crushed into oblivion while all of our communities, our supply chain are being put at long-term risk for the sake of short-term massive profits for Wall Street shareholders and company executives, right? This is part of the same horrible, vicious cycle that we're hearing about from working people in different industries in different parts of the country all over the place. So please, I beg you, pay attention to what these guys have to say. Lino, sorry to hop in there. Please, hop back in.
No, you're spot on. And, the refinery operates not only in Whiting, it's basically in the center of 3 communities. It operates in Hammond, Indiana, as well as, and also East Chicago. So it's in the middle of a very populated area that has accepted the risks of operating a large crude oil refinery in the middle of it. But the promise that was made, right, was the community was going to get some of the benefit of that. We were going to get the jobs. And it's like you said, that's where they're breaking the promise, right? So if you're bringing in workers from out of state to try to replace us, and you're trying to extract wealth out of the community, not even wealth, you're just trying to extract a basic income and a basic way of life from the area in order to send it to shareholders and wealthy executives, especially if it's a foreign oil company. So, I mean, that's the goal, right? And that's what people need to understand. They're trying to take from our community and from people that actually live and work here in order to send it elsewhere.
To build on something that Eric said too about the equal footing to have when we're talking, when we're negotiating with this company, a union, honestly, to me, is the only way that everybody who has a particular job is going to get that same pay. Doesn't matter how much the guy next to you is kissing ass to the company. It doesn't matter if you're man, woman, or what color you are. You're getting that pay. It's not that your friend across the aisle is going to get an extra $20 an hour because he's buddies with the boss. Everybody gets the pay for that work, and that's the only guarantee, honestly, to me in this country that you have that.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the company's large proposals that they have on the table is to eliminate seniority as a means for promotion, and they view it as well. It's a flawed system. That it's not always the best person that gets it with seniority. They want to go what they call merit-based. Well, let's look at the reality. Let's look at outside of a union facility. Do women and men in this country make the exact same amount of money for doing the exact same job? Why not? Because their system, the merit-based system, is so effective. Do minorities make as much money as white men in this country for doing the exact same job? Absolutely not. Time and time again, no one would even argue that case. Well, is that a merit-based system? It is. So merit, they act like merit is some great system that only the best and the brightest rise to the top, and that's full of they're full of shit, and everybody knows that, right? The guy who plays softball and goes to the bar with the supervisor afterwards is more likely to get the good jobs and get better pay, right? The executive's nephew that gets brought right into the plant and gets to go to the front of the line, that guy is more likely to make more money than everybody else. That's what merit-based systems are. So absolutely, that's one of the main issues with them. And back to the safety piece, another one of their issues, and I don't want to get too much into the nuances of the proposals because we would need a 3-hour show probably. But one of them is the reclassification of all of our jobs. So as Lino was saying, right now he's risen to the level of an operations specialist. We have operations specialist field, operations specialist board, and then operations specialist cross qualified, which is you do them both. That is like the top of the top. They want to eliminate those roles, but then still have us do the same work. But they want to call us Tech 3s and Tech 4s, and then the company would get to pick the Tech 4s. But then they also, for our operators, they want them to have to know 5 different jobs throughout the refinery. Places that it might take you 15 minutes to get from this unit to the next unit, and that's hoping there's not a train stopped in the middle of the refinery. They want to spread everybody out and make them the term, jack of all trades, the ace of none. Well, if you just go back a few years ago, our sister refinery in Toledo, Ohio, which BP has since sold, it's no longer a British Petroleum facility, but there was a double fatality. 2 brothers were killed in a fire out there. And the Chemical Safety Board, when they came back, when they finally concluded their study, one of their findings that they punished the company for was rotating the operators too much so that they didn't just get good in one area. So the company's taking credit for, well, I've got this many operators that can handle this many jobs, but they can't do it, like they necessarily can't do it well. You do it better when you specialize, right? So flash forward. So the Chemical Safety Board says that the company was wrong for the way that they were handling operations. So what does this management group decide to do? They decide to put a proposal on the table to do exactly here what they were doing in Toledo and spread our operators too thin. If people just saw the proposal, the average person in the community, they wouldn't understand the implications of the company's proposals, and it would make it incredibly unsafe out here. Not to mention, making these guys do a lot more work for less money. But again, more importantly, you're going to have a bunch of people who just aren't going to be as familiar with the equipment. When stuff goes wrong, you need the people that just know instantaneously, instinctively, how to get out there and what to do.
Well, and I mentioned earlier, right, that this is the sickness that we're seeing spread to industries all across the board. And like, even though people may not understand the nuances of y'all's contract, they understand that sickness of the corporate minded, Wall Street minded obsession with, cutting costs year after year, piling more work onto fewer workers, removing important layers of security to save a buck, and all at the expense of the workers who are being, asked to do way too much for less than they were getting before. That leads to hazards all over the damn place, right? That's the same stuff that we've heard from your fellow machinists at Boeing, who describe hey, how did job conditions in planes get so bad at Boeing over the years? Well, this is part of it. That worker that I interviewed on the Deepwater Horizon when it blew in the Gulf, he said the same thing. BP was pushing speed over safety, and look at the results, right? I mean, the same thing was said to us by the railroad workers. They've been cutting jobs. They've been making the trains longer and heavier. They've been making workers be on call 24/7, running them into the ground. And it's only a matter of time until those short-term profits run out and you end up with a massive, massive, dangerous problem that's going to take years to fix. And that is, again, I really, really want to stress for folks, those are the stakes of what we're talking about here, not just for frontline workers in these industries, but for fence line communities living near these industries or living near a railroad track, living near the Gulf of Mexico or any coast where, your ability to go outside is is basically in the hands of wealthy corporations that are making disastrous decisions that could impact you and your family. But I don't want to belabor the point because I know we have, limited time here. And I wanted to, before we get really into the lockout itself, Eric, I wanted to ask if you could unpack for our listeners the baseline of understanding that we need to have for labor relations in this industry, kind of how this is working with bargaining with BP, right? I mean, because we had to learn that 4 years ago when the railroad workers almost went on a national strike. I had to become a PhD in the Railway Labor Act and explain quickly that there are 13 craft unions. They're 4 major rail carriers. Everyone's bargaining in sort of different fashion. So listeners of this show are a little familiar with kind of, hairy labor questions like that. But I guess just for your average lay listener, what are the things that folks need to understand about how bargaining works in this industry so that they understand everything that we're going to talk about with the lockout?
Yeah, sure. So in the oil industry, we bargain at a national level. Not every facility, but every USW facility is in one way or another part of the national oil bargaining pattern agreement. And that's been since the 1960s. Since the 1960s, there's only been, we haven't had a national strike. We had one in 2015. Prior to that, 1980, I believe. So there's really, yes, how is the labor relations in the industry? National oil bargaining, it's been a stabilizing influence for both our members and the companies. Usually when we've got our final settlement offer on the table, it gets, the top table will bargain it, and then it gets passed out to everybody else across the country. And we put it across the table locally. Typically, you always feel like, man, I wish we got more. It wasn't great, but 90-something% of the membership votes yes for it. It's that kind of, and that's probably how good bargaining works. Is neither party walks away feeling like they absolutely got the whole hog. Both parties feel like we got something, we gave up a little bit of something, and we move on. That's how it's typically been. Now this is a lockout, right? And there's only been 2 lockouts in the oil industry in the last 25 years that we're aware of. And there's one common denominator between the 2 lockouts is there's one guy that was at ExxonMobil on the HR team, on the negotiating team, that was part of the lockout in Beaumont, Texas. Again, it was an Exxon refinery in Beaumont, Texas. They were locked out for 10 and a half months. While they were locked out, British Petroleum liked what they saw. They hired one of the guys from that team. His name's Jordan Marks. They hired him, and he came to Whiting and started working in the background. He wasn't at the table with us in the first round of bargaining, but he had been there, kind of, looking at the contract and trying to, devise a way to do here what he did in Beaumont, Texas. And so that's where we're living right now. Part of the reason that we believe that we filed so many labor board charges is that it was apparent that the company was at best surface bargaining. They had no intent to get an agreement this round of bargaining. Their intent was to push us into a strike, and then eventually, if we didn't strike, then they were just going to lock us out. So this was preordained. The company had this in mind the entire time, and that's absolutely apparent. Now, national bargaining, everybody else, every other corporation that's a part of it, agreed to the pattern. There's only one other site. There's a site in California that's having issues too. But the rest of the country, the membership all voted yes, and the companies all voted yes on national oil bargaining. So we are just we're in an absolute different spot than our peers. When we get together with our sisters and our brothers from other locals, people that work for Marathon, people that work for Exxon, Chevron, they don't have these problems. Most of their negotiations were not contentious. Obviously, they didn't get everything they wanted, but they all got a deal on time. So that's kind of where we're at. Is we're just in this spot where British Petroleum chose years ago to go down this road in an effort to break the union here, to eliminate the union.
Let's talk a little more about that, right? Like, let's talk about how we got to this point, and like, what are the key contract issues and working conditions that you're fighting with the company over right now? Like, and how far back does this fight go?
It's, so it started, they kind of tested the waters in our last round of bargaining. So our last contract negotiation period was in 2022. It was another round where the rest of the country, the companies and the unions all agreed to national pattern and moved on down the road. We had to roll our contract for weeks after the expiration of the contract because British Petroleum had a 120-day strike and lockout notice on the table, which is something that they also did. Jordan and his cronies in Beaumont, Texas, there was a little bit less, but they put a strike and lockout notice on the table for them, the previous contract. So again, it's lazy, just bringing the exact same lazy playbook. So that was last round of bargaining. And eventually we had enough people in management that had a spine and could push back against corporate interests that were pushing for that 120-day strike and lockout notice, and they pulled it off the table and we went down the road. So it started last round of bargaining where you could see the writing was on the walls. Our smaller bargaining units, we also represent a plant right across the street called Whiting Clean Energy, which is a British Petroleum plant. We represent our plant guards, our pipeline employees. So, and we've seen the company coming just absolutely trying to gut their contract. So, and that's what we saw this round. It's hard to answer what are the issues because it's everything. They basically took the contract book and went from cover to cover, and they're proposing to change pretty much anything that benefits a union worker. Again, with the job reclassifications, we have decades of memorandums of agreements, letters of understandings, side agreements that govern how our job classifications work, how they're policed. They want to eliminate all those and start all over again, and then put management's rights on everything. Once we ink the deal, their proposal is going forward, the company can make any changes they want that they see fit. So who would sign a contract that the very next day it's rendered useless because the company can go and change it however they want? And that's where our job classifications, how we're trained, what kind of work we have to do, how they can eliminate someone, how they can terminate someone for the company's their interpretation of lack of ability. So that elimination of seniority for the bidding into higher positions. Elimination of plant seniority for the purpose of layoffs. So, right now their proposal is they could basically, once we sign the deal, if they wanted to eliminate one of our groups, our lab, we represent our laboratory employees. As soon as we sign the deal, The company could then give us a piece of paper saying, oh, by the way, we're gonna lay off 50 people in the lab. And then it would just go by that, right? Whereas right now we have plant seniority. If they wanted to lay off 50 people, it's the 50 junior people, which makes it painful on the company. But what it does is it forces them to come sit down and be reasonable and have a conversation about you have to reduce headcount. We don't want to talk about it, but we will. We're not afraid to have hard conversations, and then we'll work out a way to try to help them meet their goals, but at the same time protect our members. They want to eliminate that. It just goes on and on and on. Management's rights for the use of AI. Their original proposal was that the contract language would survive the life cycle of the contract. They said it would go into perpetuity, meaning you're going to agree to something that forever you've given up your rights, your local, state, and federal rights to bargain over the use of artificial intelligence forever. And that's just ridiculous, absolute ridiculous language. But again, it just goes on and on and on. And any one of these issues during a regular year would have been a very contentious issue that could have led to a strike or a lockout. And instead, they decided to throw the entire kitchen sink at it.
And the way that they're trying to like sweeten this deal is offer like one-time, payments to you guys, right? Like basically blood money to say like, hey, take this couple $1,000s and like sign away your collective bargaining rights. I mean, like that's nuts. And that's me speaking. That's, that's just me editorializing, but this is kind of making my head spin. And I know I could talk to you guys for hours, but we don't have that long. And so like with the time that we have, I wanted to go back around the table and just ask if you guys could sort of like tell listeners how this whole lockout situation has unfolded as you've experienced it. Like give us a worker's eye view breakdown of events on the ground since the lockout began to now. Like, how are you guys holding up after 5 months of this?
Well, with me being on the assistance committee, we're meeting at least 3 days a week, sometimes more, usually 6 to 7 hours a day. And everybody brings in their necessity bills. They bring in your mortgage, your rent, your car note, your car lease, your medical bills if they're broken down in the monthly things, insurance, our medical insurance, the things we need to live that we can no longer provide for ourselves because BP took away our paychecks. We on the assistance committee hear the sad stories every day of like, well, we had to cut this back. We weren't able to do this with the kids this summer. We weren't able to do this. I had to sell this. And you get jaded to it because you're hearing it all the time, but it's every day there's another heartbreaking story that you're hearing because this person put in I've got guys who have put in 2 years. I've had families that have come in, the guy's been here 25 years and they can't provide how they've been providing for their family for the last 25 years. It's crazy.
Yeah, it hurts. And that's by design, right? I mean, that's what BP is. The company that all three of us have, been here on average close to 20 years, right? And by design, the company that we've all missed holidays, birthdays. We've been dedicated workers for 20 years. And in order for short-term gains to be able to take from us, this company just posted in 3 months, they made $5.7 billion and they're paying a bigger dividend, right? We've been here sacrificing our personal lives for 20 years and they are intentionally hurting us and our families. So it's shameful.
Not just the holidays we've missed, but you mentioned 12-hour shifts, 16, 18-hour shifts, 12 to 19 shifts in a row. I mean, it's great money when we're working, but you don't see your family for 19 days. You go home and you say hey to the wife and you fall asleep. I mean, it's for them not to think that this is a sacrifice every day, that what we're doing for them, to then make a sacrifice even farther on this. It just drives you out of your mind.
Yeah, that goes back to, you asked the benefits of a union. We're the union, right? The union is its workforce. The union is voted by us. It represents us. It is us. It's the workforce, right? A Fortune 500 company, the workers are a line item, right? You're a number on a spreadsheet. You mean absolutely nothing to them, nothing at all. So British Petroleum has no loyalty to us whatsoever. The only thing they care about is their shareholders. That's it. It's short-term value. Like I said, they made $5.7 billion in 3 months and increased their dividend while we were locked out.
So where do things stand now? Like, what can be done, and what can folks listening to this do to stand in solidarity with y'all and the other 800 folks who have been locked out here?
So unfortunately, we're at a standstill right now. Again, as Lino just mentioned, that's by design, right? They didn't lock us out with the intent to hurry up and get a deal. They locked us out knowing that they have a number in their mind. They know how many months that they wanted this to go, right? They want to put as much economic stress and pain on families as possible, with the intent that eventually we'll crack. Eventually, enough of the membership will, be when they're visiting the assistance committee asking for help. Those conversations will turn from uncomfortable right now, painful, turn to hostile and panicked. That's what the company wants. We're not there yet. We're not even close to there yet. But that's their design, right? So we don't foresee, unfortunately, this ending anytime soon. The things that we're trying to do, where we're hoping to make some headway, is public pressure, try to make sure that the community understands what's going on, and try to ask the community to be vocal, to stand up and support us, and tell British Petroleum to end the lockout and get back to the table, and for the first time actually come seriously with the desire to bargain. We're asking the same of our local leaders, whether it's political leaders or community leaders. We're asking the same of state officials, federal officials. We feel like if we can get enough public pressure, enough political pressure, enough economic pressure on, maybe somebody in London will finally say, all right, enough's enough. This is just, let's go get a deal. So that's kind of where we're at right now, is just in this holding pattern and doing everything we can to keep our membership and their families propped up. Just yesterday, one of our representatives, Carolina Ramsey, she's also the one that she oversees our entire assistance committee. She helped organize a school supply giveaway and backpack giveaway. That was really well attended. We had a lot of local political leaders pitched in and put the word out to get these supplies sent in, book bags and everything that would be needed to go inside them. So between things like that, the food pantry, we've had our local food bank, Northwest Indiana Food Bank, teamed up with the United Way, and we had 4 mobile distributions where they came out to the Union Hall and dropped off food. Like Tim was talking with our assistance committee, we've had our assistance committee up and running since about maybe a month into this, and we've probably we've given out quite a bit of money, and we'll continue to do so. And everything we're doing is with the intent to try to make sure that people stay calm, that people have at least their basic needs met, and just kind of supplement them, while at the same time asking them to go out and find work, because that's how we're going to win this, is by being able to withhold. And we've had numerous people go out of state to find jobs. It's kind of something, it's an interesting spot to be in. Some people had no problem right away going to find a job. It depends what field you came from. If you were in the local pipe fitters union before you came and worked here, and you still paid your dues in the background and still kept your card, you probably went right back to work, right? Same thing if you were in the electricians union, carpenters union. But some of our operators are in a much different spot, because this is such a niche field. Where do you go to the next refinery to go find a job? And that's where people are having to go out of state to go find work. And a lot of people can't, because it's like we're toxic to them, because they know, oh, well, why would I waste money to hire this guy or gal if they're going to leave and go right back to British Petroleum once the lockout's over? So we've had a lot of people say, they told me they loved me, they loved everything about the interview and my resume, they'd hire me, but they ask that I commit to, I'm not going to go back to the refinery when the lockout ends. And when people would honestly tell them, I can't promise that, then they'd say, well, thanks. If you change your mind, let us know.
Well, and like what you're talking about goes the other way as well, right? I mean, like for folks out there listening, like the question of like why should anyone like stand in solidarity with 800 union workers who've been locked out by their employers? Like, because you stand with your fellow worker, right? I mean, like you do it because it's what's right to do. That's our policy on this show. It's been our policies from the beginning. But on top of that, I think anyone living near this facility in Indiana or Illinois would want to know that dangerous, complex facility is being operated by undertrained scab workers right now. And we don't ever want to like punch down and say like your fellow worker is your enemy. I mean, those people who have taken those jobs have their own bargain with God that they're going to have to kind of deal with. But like the point of fact is that like the trained specialists that you're talking about are not operating the specialized machinery in that oil refinery right now.
Yeah, to expand on that too, right? One of their proposals that's a sticking point for us, as Eric mentioned, that they brought to the table last time as well, is the strike and lockout. Right now, we can serve 24-hour strike notice. Currently they want 150 days. Their BP stance publicly that they keep repeating over and over is that they need that. They need at least that 120 to 150 day strike notice to be able to continue to operate the refinery safely in the event of a work stoppage. How much notice did they give us when they locked us out? 24 hours. So both things can't be true. Either you don't need it or you're lying, right? Or you're operating unsafely currently in the community. If it's unsafe to operate without that much of a notice and preparation, then that's how you're currently operating, unsafely.
And to point out the 24-hour notice that we have, that's not Wildcat 24-hour notice. That's not mid-contract. That's only after the contract expires. And I think a lot of people in the community don't see that, don't understand that. So they think like just on any random Tuesday, I could just wake up in a bad mood and serve the company 24-hour strike notice. No. This is after you've spent months negotiating a contract. You knew that February 1st was the contract expiration. And our goal is to be as early as possible to hash out any issues so that by February 1st, you got a deal. You get that national agreement comes down from the top table. You take it to membership, you vote on it, and you move on. What they want to do is make that February 1st, where we're now that not once February 1st comes, now we can serve notice. And it's something that we don't take lightly. We could have done it this round of bargaining, and a lot of our members were upset that we weren't serving strike notice when the contract expired because of all the ridiculous proposals that the company had on the table. So it's something that we're not going to just flippantly serve strike notice. We understand that people it's painful for us, right? To be on strike. We're willing to do it. It's just we don't take it lightly. Well, so February 1st comes. Now what they want to do with this 150-day strike and lockout notice is they won't even start really seriously bargaining until about 148 days into that 150-day strike and lockout notice, because that's how they're working it now. Our contract expires February 1st. They're not serious about the proposals until the end of January. They just keep wanting to play mess around, and they want to do this art of the deal stuff where they just put crazy things on the table, knowing that, hey, we're going to pull them off and we'll meet in the middle type of thing. So that's all they're going to do. They're going to shift us 148 days down the road. Now maybe they'll start to bargain. Meanwhile, the rest of the country, the national pattern folks all went back to work.
Well, and Tim, I wanted to toss it to you to have the final word here, being a volunteer for the Lockout Assistance Committee. Any final notes that you wanted to give for folks out there listening, folks in the area or folks listening from around the country, anything that they can do to help?
You touched on a point about not punching down on your fellow workers, whether it's in your union or out in the community. This is 800 families who don't have the money right now to go out to eat. They're cutting down on all of their summer projects, their summer vacations. Things aren't getting, the jobs that you normally do around the house during the summer, like, doing your deck, your fence, and that kind of stuff. We're not able to spend that. We're not able to employ a contractor. We're not able to tip the waitress at the restaurant because we're not even going to the restaurants. Everybody is seeing a reduction in the wages because we are cut out. We have a couple of websites. I'm sure that we can share those, but I can't remember all of them right off the top of my head right now, but Eric can get to that. But we gladly appreciate any donation that we can get. Any help is helping. I was here yesterday handing out backpacks and notebooks and all the school supplies yesterday. It's not just taking that money off of the people's hands. It was also like your wife isn't having to freak out at the store trying to figure out how she's going to buy the stuff.
Yeah, we'll say to your point, the website that you ask how people can help. The easiest way is we propped up a website specifically for what we're dealing with. It's called supportoilworkers.com. On that website, it answers all those questions. Like if you wanted to send a check to help our assistance committee help pay bills, or that money's also goes to help just run the hall on a day-to-day basis, making sure that we have food for picketers, making sure that we've got the toiletries and things like that at the hall. So there's an address and a way to send a check there. There was a link to an Amazon store for us, and that's been fantastic. Every day we get shipments in here of diapers, formula, non-perishable food items, toiletries, things like that. We stock them on the shelves, and then members are free to come and take anything that they need. So supportoilworkers.com. And then hopefully today, it's going to start. We've been working with a company that we've used for years for all of our like our swag, our t-shirts and hats, Image Point. And today, hopefully we'll have this store up and running. We're going to have a pop-up store. There's two shirts that people can pick from. It's going to be nationwide. We'll be blasting this out every which way we can. It's only going to be up for 2 weeks. And you can pick either of these shirt designs and a multitude of colors and styles, anything from a hooded sweatshirt to a tank top to a regular t-shirt. And then the proceeds for that will go help our strike and defense fund. So again, today I will send you that link once we get it up and running. We're just getting the bugs ironed out of it. There'll be a couple of shirts. It'll run for 2 weeks, then it'll shut down. They'll go into production, and they'll start mailing out all the shirts to whoever purchased one. And then a couple weeks later, we're going to pop up a second store with 2 different shirts. So all in, there's going to be 4 different shirt designs for people to pick from. And we're kind of hoping that some people that, if you have the means and you really want to show some support, we hope that some people will choose to try to collect all 4 of those shirts.
All right, gang, that's going to wrap things up for us today. I want to thank our guests, Eric Schultz, President of United Steelworkers Local 7-1, Lino Miller, Assistant Griever for USW Local 7-1, and Tim Powell, a 19-year member of USW Local 7-1 and a volunteer for the Lockout Assistance Committee. And of course, I want to thank you all for listening, and I want to thank you for caring. We'll see y'all back here next time for another episode of Working People. And in the meantime, go explore all the great work that we're doing at the Real News Network, where we do grassroots reporting that lifts up the voices and stories from the front lines of struggle. Check us out across our YouTube channel, our podcast feeds, our website, and our different social media pages. And help us do more work like this by going to therealnews.com/donate and becoming a supporter today. I promise you guys, it really does make a difference. I'm Maximilian Alvarez. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. Solidarity forever.
When my face you no longer see, I live on, yes, I live on. Wherever we go, we're going to roll the Union on. The song I live on, yes, I live on. Wherever hungry are we. Just as hungry can be. The song I live on, yes, I live on. Where mean things are happening in this land, it's read a song I live on, yes, I live on. Wherever the book mean things are happening in this land is read, I live on, yes, I live on. Wherever the videotape of me is shown, I live on, yes, I live on. If I have help to make this a better world to live in, I'll live on, yes, I'll live on. When my body is I live on. When my songs and poems are read, I live on, yes, I live